Hello and welcome to our monthly Edge user group. We're glad you're able to join us today. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on our Acro webinar archive page within 24 hours. And if you haven't already done so, please do turn on closed captions. And last but not least, we welcome all of your questions and ask you to please use the Q&A feature to post your questions. You can post them at any time, and you can post your questions anonymously. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Julia. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Belma. Hello and welcome to December's 2024 Edge User Group. We're so glad you're here. You are what make this fun and exciting and why we do what we do. So welcome, and I'd like to just introduce the International Education Standards Council. This is a group that we really utilize their experience and expertise and many years of experience performing what you see in Edge. They really vet everything, they go through it, and they do a lot of research. Today, we are lucky to have with us from that International Education Standards Council, Emily Say, Shelby Kearley, and Robert Watkins. So welcome to them, and I look forward to having them share their expertise with you. We will go on to our agenda and we will do our poll right now. Is that all right? Oh, Belma, do you have the poll ready to go? Checking on our poll. There we go. So this is our poll that we hold every Edge user group, and there are just a few questions here. Are you an Edge subscriber? Is this your first user group? And what segment do you represent? While you're looking at that and filling that out, let's think about December. It's the 12th month of the year in our modern Gregorian calendar, as it was in the preceding Julian calendar. However, back in the Roman calendar, it was the 10th month. Hence, the word December comes from the Latin decem, meaning 10. So, interestingly enough, back in Roman times, calendar only had 10 months and began with March. Winter wasn't even assigned months because it was a time of rest and recovery and regrouping for the military, for agriculture, and for civilian life. Back then, it consisted of 30 days. And after January and February were added to the calendar around 700 BCE, December was shortened to 29 days. Then 2 days were added to December in the subsequent Julian calendar, making it 31 days long. So there's a little info on December and why it is named after the word 10. Let's go see what we found out with our poll. Yes, 91% of you, 49 out of 54 are Edge subscribers. Thank you. We appreciate you and your subscription. 5 of you have not subscribed. We hope that this webinar itself will be an opportunity for you to find out what Edge is all about and the kind of work and the kind of dynamic nature of updates that we give to Edge. Is this your first user group? Wow, nearly a quarter of you it is. So welcome. We're very glad you're here. The rest of you, thank you for your regular attendance. We are always excited to see your faces and see you in the chat. And what segment do you represent? Many of you, 83%, are institutional. Couldn't do this without you. And the valuation service, we have 8 of you here. As always, welcome. And we have somebody from the government here. We are so grateful for your attendance and glad you are here. With that, let's go over to the agenda. Drew, would you like to go over the agenda with everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Julia. I'm excited. We've got a few different updates to provide for y'all going on right now. We're going to talk about some madrasa education out of Bangladesh, some updates that have been provided to us based on the research from one of our contributors, Alex Popovsky. That's from a couple of credentials in Ukraine. We have some doctoral level credentials that we cleaned up, updated, and have provided more information for you on with Italy's Diploma di Perfezionamento and the Dottorato di Ricerca. And we've also got information on an integrated master's program from Greece that is more complicated than you might think upon first glance. While we're going through all of this, I want to remind all of you, it is the 19th of December. So if you are going to be giving any gifts this season, you're behind and you need to get it done. I know I do. Let's go on and talk about some of the things that we were just mentioning. And at the last Edge user group for, I believe it was 76% of you this is not your first time here, but if you were at the last one, we talked about that provisional degree certificate. That's been updated across Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. And we've ensured that that's accessible. A couple of you did have questions about accessing all of that. Shouldn't be running into any barriers getting the updated details that have been written up about these provisional degree certificates. But to stay down in Bangladesh, I'm going to hand this right over to you, Shelby. You're down in West Texas. Here you go.
All right. Hi, everybody. As Drew mentioned, I'm going to give you a very quick overview of madrasa education in Bangladesh. And this is because one of the more recently published new education ladders is for Bangladesh, and it includes both academic track and madrasa track. So what exactly is madrasa education? Madrasa education is basically Islamic religious education rather than students attending a regular academic track secular school. So these credentials are available at the primary and secondary level and also at the post-secondary level. So since 1978, when the Madrasa Education Ordinance was passed, this established the Bangladesh Madrasa Education Board, or the BMEB, as an autonomous entity under the Ministry of Education, and it oversees regulated madrasa institutions at the primary and secondary levels. This bill had to be updated for very strange legal reasons in 2020, so it has been replaced with the 2020 Bangladesh Madrasa Education Bill. The MEB is still in charge of overseeing madrasa education at recognized institutions offering the two credentials that you see below. The first is Dakhil. This is a program that's 5 years in length, and it follows 5 years of primary Islamic education. So it represents a total of 10 years of primary and lower secondary education. It's at the same level as the academic secondary school certificate. And then 2 years later, if students continue in the Islamic or madrasa track, they can receive the alim. And this is at the same level as the higher secondary certificate. And these two credentials, and the alim for sure, I know that you can verify online through the Ministry of Education's verification portal. Next slide, please. There are actually two credentials offered in madrasa institutions at the post-secondary level. They start at 2 years, doing some very preliminary research. They may be 3 to 4 years as well for this first credential. So we have some more research to do before we can finish the entries for the EDGE Bangladesh credentials page. But the first certificate at the undergraduate level is the Fazil. And this is, like I said, at least 2 years in length. And it is offered at madrasa institutions. The madrasa institutions don't fall under the University Grants Commission. They fall under the authority of the Islamic Arab University of Bangladesh. And then after the Fazil certificate at the graduate level is the Kamil certificate. And this is a 2-year program as well. As I said, we've only started to do preliminary research because this information is included on the ladder that was recently published on the Bangladesh page. So we will get that information prepared, presented to the IESC, and voted on as quickly as possible. So stay tuned for further updates on madrasa education in Bangladesh.
Okay, Shelby, thank you very much for that. Hello, all. With respect to Ukraine, basically, this is something that is really just a change in nomenclature. As Drew said at the beginning, Alex Popovsky, who's the I'm trying to remember his title, president and CEO, I think, of UCRADO, an evaluation service in Florida, is a fantastic researcher. And just as an aside, the incredible entry for Macedonia in EDGE was largely redone by him. He did it also, and he took that information to an ACRO annual meeting session. It was virtual because that was during the pandemic, but that too was fabulous. Anyway, he noticed that our credential entries for Ukraine in the secondary level were out of date. And the reason they were out of date was because somewhere around 2017, the Ukrainian government decided to change to Ukrainian terms and get away from the old Russian terms that we still represented in EDGE Ukraine. And notice that would have been before the invasion, but after the absorption of Crimea in 2014 by the Russians. So that probably got the Ukrainian authorities thinking about maybe we just want to have our own name for the credentials. So basically, and these are now in there, what they did was to change the name of the 9-year certificate, the basic secondary certificate, and also the one that comes 2 years later after 11 years, the complete general secondary certificate. There are your new Ukrainian names up there. Sviditstvo obviously is certificate. The keywords being Bozovoy, which is basic, Srednoy secondary, and then Povnoy, the complete general secondary. So, but as we always say, old credentials don't get dumped unless they're wrong. They are retained because at some point someone's going to come across those under the old name. So we're going to hang on to Aristat, the Russian terminology for secondary the word certificate. But we have these two new additions. We've got the dates by which you'll notice that there should be the transition. Be careful with those dates because, of course, things don't happen overnight. Sometimes there's a transition or lead into them. One thing that's kind of interesting, notice that next to the last bullet point, reforms began in 2017, and it's supposedly the complete general is supposed to include grade 12, be awarded after grade 12. Let me just say one thing. When the ACRO group, Bill Paver, Johnny Johnson, Gloria Nathans, and several others were in Russia doing the book that ultimately came out around a few years after the turn of the century. At that time, they were told by the Russians that Russian education, which had not terribly long before gone to 11 years from 10, would go to 12. Never happened because these things cost money. And of course, as we all know, Ukraine's a little preoccupied right now. So I wouldn't look for that grade 12 anytime in the near future. But you can look in EDGE Ukraine and find the two credentials under their Ukrainian names now, alongside the old Russian one. I think I'm next, right?
So Robert, before
go
we
ahead.
move on from that, there was an interesting exchange in the chat going on, and it was with Shelby, who was just finishing one other point about the whether or not the ALIM certificate does allow access. Shelby, do you want to come back on camera for 1 second and just finish what you were going to say? And Robert, maybe your camera issues are working out better now. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, and there it is. I don't know how I must have hit it wrong when I was looking for chat.
Todd Colvard asked in the chat if the Madrasa secondary credentials allow admission to UGC higher education institutions in Bangladesh. And I forgot to mention that. The answer is yes. ALIMs that are awarded by institutions that are recognized by the Bangladesh Maharashtra Education Board are considered legally equivalent to the higher secondary certificate and do give access to academic or madrasa higher education in Bangladesh. So yes, you can use those to enter a university under the authority of the UGC.
Good question, Todd. And by the way, you're too young to retire. Okay. This one's interesting. again, brought not directly to the IESC, but initially something that Jasmine stumbled across there and at ACEI, and wondered about it, looked at Edge. We had it in there, but when she read the description, she was a bit surprised because it didn't seem to accord what we had in Edge for the Diploma di Perfezionamento, literally Diploma of Perfection, or obviously it even sounds like it's advanced courses designed to add to one's skills and so forth. But as they dug a bit deeper, found that in fact it was very very much a doctoral type degree. Of course, there's the regular doctorate, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But it didn't seem at all like what we said, advanced courses that don't lead to a degree and a few other things. I need to point out that Italy was an example of one of the Edge countries that were first rolled out 20 years ago. And so it may have reflected not much attention since. But anyway, but once we had this, and it was taken first to an AICE credential forum, and then Jasmine brought it to the IESC because we needed to have this in there. There's no question that it's 3 years in duration, includes a thesis, and there's even a ministerial degree dating all the way back to 2001 that says that this diploma is officially comparable to a doctoral degree. Now, so what then was this other thing that we had that we called Diploma di Perfezionamento? In fact, it appears that it may be, as you see at the bottom where we're saying be careful, that it may actually be the corsi di perfection. And so courses that, like it implies, would not necessarily lead to a degree. So there are two different things at work here with a very, very similar name. So what we're doing now, we've already added this because we want to get this doctoral type degree, doctoral level degree out there. And by the way, when it first came up, I was curious. I saw what we had in Edge, and I was curious, and I pulled off the shelf an ECE Presents book by Kristen Zanotti. She now goes by her maiden name, but she wrote that in 1996 for ECE on Italy. And she talked about it in there, that this was one of the degrees that was given legal comparability to a PhD in Italy. So we definitely wanted to get that in there. We didn't have anything like it other than the doctorate itself, the research doctorate. And so we wanted to get that in there. But right now, what we're trying to do, and Jasmine's taking the lead on this, is to try to pin down these corsi di perfezionamento, just to see exactly what they are. We'll go through several routes, Italian ENIC, but other, and then CIMEA, we'll probably talk with them, try to see if we can't pin down what these courses are as separate from the diploma. Now, let's go to the next one, Velma, if you don't mind. There's the research doctorate that we've always had in there, that everyone's familiar with. And what's interesting is, once we were dealing and pretty well had dealt with the Diploma di Perfezionamento, Drew got to, as we were still chatting, Drew started looking at Edge Italy and noticed that the research doctorate actually had two of them and had some different wording. One appeared to be pre-Bologna, the other post-Bologna, and it seemed to be pretty confusing. So what we decided to do was to change the wording, get these things together, try not to make it as confusing, have a single entry for the research doctorate, but tell you about how it might have looked prior to the adoption of Bologna compliant degrees in Italy. And as you know, Italy, of course, it was the very first Bologna meeting was in Italy, Bologna, obviously, and 1999. And so Italy was one of the first ones to pass laws to switch to Bologna compliant degree structure in 2002, 2003. So pretty quickly. So we've made these adjustments in there. We're pretty happy now with the research doctorate, but we want to dig a little deeper on the perfection courses to see how they contrast with the actual doctoral level diploma that we've discovered has always been there, but we just discovered it. So what's amazing about the EDGE process is that you think you've got things all squared away, and then somebody points out that maybe you don't. So with that, I'll send it back to you, Drew, or Julia.
Or we'll go
I-
over to Emily. It's always a mythology to think that we're going to be done updating everything. And let's get away from Roman mythology and instead head across the Aegean to Greece.
Yes, please. It's good to see everyone. We received a query from an Edge user about the 5-year integrated master. That individual noticed that it's referenced in the overview section of Greece, but it was not properly treated in the credentials section. So I had volunteered to look into this. On to the next slide. So normally, I start out by pulling out a credential profile just to orient myself, to confirm it's the credential I think we're talking about, or if I'm not familiar with it, to see what it is all about. So that could be, for example, the NAFSA online guide, the I-Year of Country Index, or the NUFIC guides. Because I wanted the most recent one, I went to the NUFIC guides, and I found this little nugget, which says that students complete some 5-year undergraduate programs with a diploma, and that these are called integrated masters, but they are not master level programs, and that instead they are placed at the Hellenic Qualification Framework level 6, which is the bachelor or first cycle university degree. So it did identify it as level 6, but then I needed to orient myself again, and I wanted to look at the Hellenic Qualifications Framework just to confirm. So onto the next slide, I found this handy diagram, and sure enough, the first cycle university degree or bachelor degree is level 6, which is what it was described as, these 5-year integrated masters. And not as level 7 as one would normally think. So I oriented myself, saw it confirmed it on the HQF, and then so I had to then make a decision. And so now I'm inviting you all to do the same. If we go to the next slide. And based on this information that was described in NUFIC, if you could put in the chat, please, what would you consider this? Again, these 5-year integrated masters, but which was described, as we saw, as undergraduate and as a level 6. So in your view, sorry, not yet. We go back to the other slide, please. Thank you. In your view, would this be comparable to a U.S. bachelor, since it's a level 6 on the Hellenic Qualifications Framework? If you believe that, if you could enter a 1 in the chat. If you think it's comparable to a U.S. master, heck, it's a 5-year degree and it's referred to as an integrated master, so please put 2. If you're not sure, you want more data, please put 3. And if it's not applicable because you're not based in the U.S., please put 4. It seems like 1 is dominating, and I appreciate some smatterings of 3s. So it seems like it's between one that tell me the answer. All right, Drew. So personally for me, I wanted to dig a little more because of what we have been seeing in the other Bologna compliant countries, right, across Europe. For example, if you were at last month's Edge user group, we talked about the Unico Ciclo unified or single cycle 5-year degree that's an integrated master in Italy that was for law, and that was made comparable or deemed comparable to a U.S. master. So just seeing what we have in other European countries that are part of the Bologna process, with their long cycle, single cycle, unified cycle, 5-year degrees, being called an integrated master and being pegged as a master on their own qualifications framework, I wanted to confirm what was written and what we found. Confirm that it is a level 6 and whatnot. So for me personally, I chose door number 3. And so on to the next slide. So I dug more, and in these kinds of situations, I do like to go to primary source information. Preferably directly from the Greek authorities then, in this instance. So I went to the ENIC-NARIC network website, which provides information on the national information centers for all the participating European countries. So I went to Greece, went over to the system of education, onto the next slide, and then went to higher education. So what happened was when I clicked on system of education, it linked me over to Eurydice, which is a great resource on educational systems across Europe. But I was particularly focused on higher ed, so that's where I went. And then on to the next slide. I did see under first cycle studies that they are typically 4 years, right? So 4 years for most majors, that's what it says. But they do have indeed 5-year degrees coming from polytechnics, applied sciences, and certain art departments. Drew, I see you ruminating there. You're just thinking over what I'm stating here, or you were going to comment?
I'm just learning. There's lots of great resources here. You're highlighting ENIC-NARIC, you're highlighting Eurydice. I like just listening to all of it. I'm really taking it in.
Okay, thanks, Drew. Despite my being Gen X, I did continue to scroll because I don't always remember the two, but I did here. And so onto the next slide, I did find information also about these degrees at the second cycle studies, right? So it says here, some graduate programs lead directly to a second cycle degree. And they talk about it being single integrated master's degree corresponding to level 7. So if we all remember from that diagram of the tree of knowledge, 6 is first cycle or bachelor, and 7 is second cycle or master. So it seems that the 5-year degrees, 300 ECTS credits, they can either be level 6 or level 7. And so that distinction is made, and we have to pay attention. So I was happy to find this information, but then now we're confronted with conflicting information. I was inclined to tend toward the information provided directly by the Greeks, but because I am selective OCD, and because we're going to put this information in EDGE, I wanted to be absolutely sure. So again, I wanted to reconfirm this latest information. So what I did was onto the next slide. I decided it was just time to write directly to the authorities. And so I went back to that ENIC-NARIC page for Greece, saw that there were a few education authorities, and I decided to write to all 3 to increase my chances of getting a response from one or all of them. So I wrote to Hellenic-NARIC. I mean, it's just a cut and paste, right, via email, so no big deal. Hellenic-NARIC, EOPEP, which oversees the Hellenic Qualifications Framework, as well as the HAHE, the Hellenic Authority for Higher Education. And I just want to give a shout out to the HAHE because they were the ones who responded to me. So thank you, HAHE. So they said, actually, these 5-year degrees, certain 5-year degrees, were actually upgraded to level 7 in 2017. So I think that may be the issue why I was having trouble finding information or clarity in the literature, because this happened basically post 2017. I did also send a follow-up email, and they were kind to respond again. And I asked if there was a list. So here's the link to that list, but mind you, it is in Greek. On to the next slide, please. So speaking of Greek, another thing that we like to do as evaluators in terms of best practices, it's great when we have English language documents, but we also like to cross-check it in the native language or the official language of issue. The tricky thing here is that there's no one degree name, meaning there can be variations. It may say integrated master, it may not. It may say instead in Greek, diploma of single cycle studies, diploma of single and integrated title of studies on postgraduate level. Luckily, I do have an example to show you of diploma of single cycle studies. And so it does say integrated master here, which is nice. But if it doesn't say that, and you're trying to, again, cross-reference, cross-check in the actual Greek language, it can be tricky because the one that we're referencing, it's in sentence case. It's, basically the first letter is uppercase, but then everything else is lowercase. Whereas on this document, the whole thing, the title, the whole thing is uppercase. So it's, if you're looking at these shapes, they're not going to match. And also with diploma, you'll see that not only is it in all caps on the certificate, but it's in another case because of where it falls in the sentence or the phrase. If we have in other languages noun declensions, and so the ending may change. So that's another challenge. So when you see this whole phrase or title at the top, starting with antigrapho means literally copy of diploma of single cycle studies. So I did sort of clumsily work my way through that, but also what you can do is, which is nice, is just take a snapshot of that and put it into Google Translate. So on to the next slide. So, always, where possible, get the diploma supplement, confirm the National Qualifications Framework level. And, again, you can take screen captures or snapshots and use the images feature in Google Translate, which is so handy and amazing to use. So on to the next slide. Now that we have the information that we do, we need to circle back and see what our conclusion is, if it's changed at all with this new information. So how would you consider this 5-year degree from Greece? Again, if you could put in the chat, thank you. Yes. 1, comparable to US Bachelor. 2, comparable to US Master. 3, it depends. And then 4, still not applicable. I'm not based in the US. So it seems like I've changed a lot of minds. I'm seeing consistently 3, a 3 with 2 exclamation points. So excellent. My work is done. This is most definitely it depends situation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for letting us know that it really all just depends. I believe it's a common phrase that I've heard that credential evaluation is a little bit art, a little bit science. You'll learn a little bit more about all of that if you take any of our we run a few institutes where we give some instruction, and we'll tell you about some of those options that you have because that's one of those upcoming events that we have. On the next slide, we do have just a list of some of those webinars, so you can go and you can view all of these for free. You can look through the archives and see all of the old ones. And as Belma mentioned at the beginning of this, this presentation is going to be available for you very shortly on this same webinar page. On the next slide, we're actually going to have Robert come on and talk just a little bit about the upcoming International Institute. I mean, it's next year, but it's February 17th through 20th. And it's going to be, yeah, I think, Robert, you're going to be providing some expertise there?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Drew. Yes, we're planning to do that, as you see in the dates. It's traditionally when we usually do it, middle of February. Sometimes it moves around a little bit, but not much. The weather's usually decent. I won't say it's good, but it's not bad. We'll have essentially the same team that we've often had: Alex Morosky, Robert Morley, Stacy Bernhardt, myself, and of course Annetta will be there leading us. And 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 again, it's to me, it's one of those things where as great a piece of info, or as great a tool as Edge is, I think in the end, what we really are trying to do with Edge is to provide information that you can read and use as a starting point to further research, and that you'll go and dig deeper, either with resources that we suggest in Edge or that you find yourself. And you heard Emily's exposition a moment ago, in which she clearly showed the other tools of research that she needed to do in order to get information in Edge. But what we don't do in Edge, and what we're not meant to do and never intended to do, was to teach people how to evaluate. And because we know there are other venues for that. And it's not just ACRO, there are others. I think West puts on some workshops, a number of others do as well. But the key is that ACRO has been doing it for quite a few years now and continues to do it. Unlike the other free things, it does cost some money. It takes place in Washington, so you have to get there and other things. But I think you'll find that it's an incredible experience, because there we do teach you how to evaluate, from the basics to the more advanced issues that bedevil us in this field. So I really encourage you to think about going. I know at least one of our people here at UT is in there. Megan Strasberg is a participant here. She attended. She and another colleague in our office attended a couple of years ago. Their boss was here a couple of years ago, 2 years before that. So we really find it useful to train our own people. I want them to hear somebody besides me. And with the team that Annette pulls together, Annetta, it's just really invaluable. So I encourage you to think about it. We sometimes hold them twice a year. We'll see if the future, will continue that. But we definitely are going to have it at least once a year, and we're definitely going to have it for you in February. So give it some thought. We run through a bunch of countries. We tackle your questions and problems. If you want to bring, we encourage you to bring them. And then we'll set aside time during the schedule in which it's kind of stump the stars. We'll stand up there and let you ask us the questions that literally have come across your desk, or that you just got emailed to you from a colleague back at the office, and try to puzzle it out for you and with you, so that it's both the learning tool and an answer to a problem. So back to you, Drew.
So other things that you might decide that you wanted to do to take advantage of some learning opportunities include the ACRO annual meeting. It's coming up. We've got, I know it's surprising that we're nearly here at the end of 2024, but spring of 2025 is just around the corner. Early bird deadlines are going to end for meeting registration on the 31st of January. And the hotel group rates are available until March 7th. If you have a preference as to what hotel you're going to be at, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and make that reservation sooner rather than later, because all those rates are available until they ultimately sell out. There's also, when you go to the ACRO meeting website and you start the registration process, Seattle Tourism has put together a bunch of information to help you make the most out of your trip when you're out there. If you have other questions about that, our meetings department is available to answer questions. But there's half-day workshops, full-day workshops. There's different tracks that you can go and look through. Meeting agenda at a glance is already up on the website, and there's so much that you can do. Look forward to seeing y'all out in Seattle. And on the next slide, something that you might see if you go look through Edge. Recently, we talked about some updates to education in Uganda, and that is something that, as I was looking through, we noticed that there was not an education ladder that was really representative of Uganda's education system, and so that's one of the ones we were like, well, we got to get that up there right now. Dave Mahaly is not with us today, but that's one that we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting for everyone. This is something that we are moving forward and always updating. And so within each page of Edge, you do have the Contact Us button, where if there's something that you identify that should be updated, send us that notification and we will get that taken care of. We appreciate all of your suggestions. As Robert mentioned, we want you and encourage you to send those in. And if you have questions going on that are not during the Edge user group, and you're at an ACRO member institution or somewhere that does have an ACRO membership, I encourage you to pose questions in the international activities community. It's something, this is a different community that's there within the exchange, but if you have questions, I encourage you to ask those in the international activities community. But today, live right now, you get to pose your questions down in the Q&A. Julia, do we have any questions that are ready to go for everyone?
Yes, we do. Let's see here. From an anonymous attendee, we have the question, I have read that students need to complete 4 subject exams in Indonesia to receive the ijazah, but I have seen students who have received the ijazah without completing exams in the 4 test subjects: Indonesian, English, mathematics, and 1 elective subject from respective stream. Are you able to provide any clarity on the exams and if they are needed? Thanks. I believe that exam was canceled in 2020. Shelby, you're nodding, so I'm going to let you pick up here.
I was going to say, since 2013, yes, they are required to take the 3 mandatory subjects, Indonesian, in English, mathematics, and then depending on what stream they're in, they have to take a 4th examination. But as Julia pointed out, in 2020, that didn't happen for obvious reasons. So it's possible that if the student that you're looking at was from 2020, that they may have been allowed to receive the ijazah without the nationals examination results. If it were after that, I would look to see if there were any news articles or any mention on the I'm not even going to try to pronounce it in Indonesian, but the ministry website that indicates that there was any kind of change to the curriculum. I just looked at the standard operating procedures manual for the 2023-2024 academic year, and there is no mention to any change. So it does still say that those 4 subjects are required for the ijazah. So if it wasn't 2020, you may want to ask for more information.
We do have an update that is an Edge from October 25th, 2022 that says Indonesia's 2022 National Assessment Schedule. Since 2021, the Minister of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology has officially replaced the national examination into the national assessment. The 2022 computer-based national assessment will start from September to November 2022, and there is a learn more there. So that might help you as well. And that does lead into an article. Well, yeah.
That is
So hopefully
something
that
that
helps.
you'll find for some of the profiles. When there was a news article, that's going to be retained there. It is worth keeping in mind exactly what Shelby was talking about. A lot of places did have exam interruptions or reschedules. There was actually an update that took place within Edge as well. It was in a Saudi Arabian grading scale, and for the particular time when an exam was not issued, the language on certificates would have changed just from successful or it's the kind of thing that is unique and is worth mentioning and is going to be captured there on you're going to find it on the overview pages for various systems around. Do we have any other questions that have come in? Let's see.
Yes, we have one from Yuki. She says, case statement versus transcript. Fayoum University, Egypt. I believe that a case statement is a document that students need to request transferring from one faculty to another faculty. We have an applicant who completed only 1 year at Fayoum University, Egypt, then completed following years at another institution in Egypt. Is a case statement used for internal purpose, or do you accept it as same as a academic transcript? Robert, would you like to answer that from an institutional perspective?
Oh yeah, I'm unmuted. I couldn't. I had to double check. I'll be honest with you. I've not heard of a case statement. I've seen something like that more often from India, where it shows and I think they call it migration or something like that certificate when they change, usually from one university to another, not necessarily from one faculty to another. As far as I'm concerned, how they got there is not as critical to me. When they change institutions, I do want official transcripts from both, so that, with one exception, and that would be the Philippines, and not just because I co-authored the book on Philippines, but because by law, Philippine universities must faithfully reproduce everything at the prior institution that they received officially when they admitted the student into their university, so that they faithfully reproduce. And I'm talking withdrawals, failures, and so forth. So everything, it must be faithfully reproduced under the name of that institution, and then it says their own coursework after that. Otherwise, no matter what country we're talking about, we need an official transcript from each, even though you knew that possibly transfer credit was used by the second receiving institution from the first. You don't take it off the second one. You go to the original source document and get that information. But Yuki, I'm just not familiar with case statements. That's an interesting concept. I'll throw it out to the others. Anybody else have an idea on that?
I don't in specific relation to academic credentials, but I know that case statements are used like with job applications in Egypt, like say, for example, they're advertising for a faculty position, or somebody is advertising like for a nursing position or whatever. They may ask for a case statement from your employer. And so I think it's some sort of document, but I don't know exactly what that would be in reference to an academic record. My advice right now would be perhaps you might want to try contacting Education USA in Egypt and asking if one of their advisors can give you any kind of clarification as to what a case statement is, how it might be used in an academic setting, and if this document could be accepted in lieu of an actual transcript from the institution for a student who has not completed a degree or a credential at that particular university. They may be able to give you some information. But I've never actually seen one of those myself, so I don't really know.
It sounds like it is not the equivalent of a provisional certificate in everyone's experience. It is not going to be a comparable in that kind of way. And let's see, what else do we have, Julia? A couple of questions on South Sudan.
Right. Amy points out, she says, how do we approach documentation from South Sudan? And I don't think there's a separate entry in EDGE for South Sudan. You are correct. We do not have a profile in EDGE on South Sudan. Robert, I see you brought your you took your camera off. Okay. Don't know if you want to address, and Drew, you said you wanted to answer the question as well?
Oh, no, I'm saying that I'm just indicating that we are answering this right now.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that's so stunning about EDGE, and I don't mean stunning in a good way, about EDGE is that 20 years later, it's astounding to us when we see stuff in there, or it's brought to our attention by you guys who use EDGE, that something's missing, like a ladder, or now it's one thing that grading scales change, credentials change, and things like that over time. But I'm talking about stuff that we should have had from the very beginning. And, we're just realizing there's some profiles that way. Sometimes it's political. We're just put the finishing touches on Palestine, and dealing with that. Of course, we do that right as things tend to blow up there. South Sudan is one we've not yet dealt with, but I suspect that we'll talk about it at one of the upcoming meetings and see if we're ready to deal with that. And sometimes what you've got to do is to make sure the country is in fact recognized by enough other countries that it's a member of the UN. That's not always a gold standard, but it's helpful. And to look at other things to see if you want to have an entry for that particular country. Obviously, a controversial one was Palestine, and so, but we decided it's just been too long. There's been some recognition there of West Bank and Gaza, and so it needed to be out there. South Sudan, that's an interesting one. Of course, that's a country now, but there's so much going on there in terms of conflict that even if we decide to do it, will we be able to get the necessary documents? Now, your question may, in fact, be more like not worrying about whether it's an edge or not, but more likely, what are we to do with individuals that come from there, that are applying from there, or that have gone to a neighboring country and are applying from there, and wanting to come to my institution and may or may not have the documentation I require normally to be admitted to my institution. And that's where ACRO has been active. Of course, Annette Estrada was one of the key individuals in that, along with Melanie Gottlieb, the executive director, with the Backpack Project with Lebanon and neighboring areas in terms of countries in crisis and what are we supposed to do. I think your South Sudan question might even be widened to encompass Ukraine and some other places where there are problems going on and that documentation may be difficult to obtain. I'll just leave with this thought, and I realize it's a conservative one, and that is that it's difficult to make good admission decisions based on little to no information. And number two, and of course, if you want to throw in the equity piece, everyone else has to give something. So why should this individual get in with no documentation? And then more critically, is there something I can do that will bend my rules a little bit so that I'm using unofficial documentation instead of official documentation, that I'm taking it from the individual rather than requiring it to come from an institution, the home institution, and so on and so forth. Bend deadlines to give them more time to get the information. All those things we can do and should do. Doing without, however, I think is something we must think about very carefully. And if we do so, we do so at our peril.
All right, I am going to take another question that we have on Myanmar. And that question was a few questions about Myanmar. The education ladder on the website indicates that basic education standard 10 exam diploma A or B is awarded after the students complete grade 10. We had a number of students who applied from Myanmar, and when we asked for this diploma, they were not very sure and sent their matriculation exam certificate instead. So I wanted to double check if this information is still up to date. And I've read an article published in 2023 that the curriculum would be updated from grade 10 to 12. Do you know if there was an official first batch of high school students who graduated from this new curriculum? If so, when was it and what was the credential? I'll go ahead and start on a little bit of this, and I'd like you all to chime in, Emily, Shelby, and Robert. Education really moved from 10 years to 11 years. I think it was back in 2002. And the goal was to go to 12 years, to transition to 12 years, I think by 2022, 23. But as you know, the military junta that took place, 3 years ago now, almost, in Myanmar has really just decimated so much of the education system and the schools, etc. So what is happening on the ground may be very different from what they were planning when they came out with their national education plan some years ago. And to get the latest, there is going to be a free 30-minute webinar by ECE on Myanmar, and I believe
That was
that
yesterday.
it was yesterday. Ugh,
That was yesterday.
sorry, I
It's
missed
okay.
it. Go ahead,
So
Shelby.
look out. I was going to say, so look out on the ECE Connection website. So it's I believe it's theconnection.ece.org. So it should be available at some point next week. And you should be able to get a copy of the recording and the slide deck. And Martha Van Devender did a really excellent overview of encapsulating what this military coup has kind of done to education and what that's kind of done to the disruption of education, particularly at the secondary level. And that, yes, they were supposed to have these changes to the system, but they haven't been implemented because of the coup and whatnot. And it was a really excellent, very thorough, but understandable overview. And you might want to message Martha. I'll get her email and stick it in the chat in just a minute. If you have any questions between now and next week, since next week is Christmas, I don't know that they're going to have their usual timeline to put these up within a week. So Martha might be able to answer that for you based on the research that she did for her presentation yesterday.
Yeah, so yes, go there. That would be the best source for that. There have been a lot of sort of shadow education kind of education going on. So really good to get the latest and greatest from Martha.
Julie, I have nothing to add. That you guys are great. You really got that information down. In the minutes remaining, though, I would like to address the second question that appears there in chat. Very briefly, it is,
I knew you would.
yeah, for the national diploma, higher national diploma in Nigeria, is it equivalent to bachelor's degree or just mean they did undergraduate study? Can they apply for any post degree diploma across USA or Canada? Okay, so basically, the questioner is asking, what's our take on the HND? Of course, the ND is just 2 years, and the HND is 2 years after that. So we've got 4 years of education after a 12-year primary secondary cycle. So, and of course, as you know, in EDGE Nigeria, we say, EDGE says, IESC says that it's comparable to 4 years of education, not to a bachelor's degree. There is a great deal of controversy in Nigeria about this. It may even lead to some kind of legislation in the near future. I know some have been percolating around. I don't think it's actually anything's gotten passed yet. There's a dichotomy from those who are university educated and those who are, and these diplomas, by the way, come from polytechnics. Polytechnics do not have the right to award degrees, bachelor's degrees. So your options as you come out of West African senior secondary school certificate is university and degrees, or polys and an ND, HND, with postgrad diplomas after that. And so to my mind, I say it's not comparable. It's more applied, yes. That isn't always a problem for us in the field. But one thing that does bother me is that a degree exists called a bachelor's degree in Nigeria. And so because that exists, that's the one I look to as comparable to our bachelor's degree. The HND I look at as something else and not the same thing. Once upon a time, and I know I'm running out of time, but once upon a time, there was no real question here because you entered a poly after 11 years and O-levels, and then went for 2 years for an ND and 2 years for an HND, so that it was altogether 15 years of education. And so to our way of thinking, there's no question here. This is not a bachelor's degree. But once the late 80s came along and the Nigerian educational structure changed away from the British model to more national model, you now have this 12 plus 2 plus 2. And so it does seem unfair that we do not consider the 4-year HND to be a bachelor's. But just because it's 4 years doesn't mean that it walks and talks like a bachelor's degree. And so that's kind of been my position. I'll leave you with one thought, one thing that I did come up with. One day, and I don't remember, it was a year or so ago, Emily and I started talking to each other. We both agreed an HND is not comparable to a U.S. bachelor's. But we then said to ourselves, is there anything they can do that'll make it better? Is there something they can get after the HND that would change our minds in terms of admission where a bachelor's degree is required? And the answer is, if they get another 1-year PG diploma on top of the HND, we probably have to say, okay, that's it. We've got to let them in, or we at least have to consider them. So that's where we sort of decided on that. But HND, no.
And can I say something really quick? I know that we're
Please.
and I want to say that my own personal opinion echoes Robert's and Emily's position, but my current institution has a different policy. My previous institution did not. It was the same as Edge's and UT's position, but my current system has a different policy. Their policy is that, yes, in Nigeria, there is a bachelor's degree separate from the HND, but this credential can give access to further graduate education. And so their policy is that since it can give access in very limited situations, then we will accept that as a bachelor equivalent degree. This is our institutional policy. This is not my opinion. But this is something that was in place before I joined our team. This is what we consider the HNDs to be comparable to. And I will say that it's only for Nigeria. We don't have this policy in regards to other HNDs at the present time. I don't know if we might receive a challenge at some point, but it might be an institutional decision. So that's
Absolutely.
something that you might want to look at individually for your institution.
Absolutely. And that is why EDGE gives you advice, but you know your institution best and should formulate those decisions accordingly.
Well, guys, we're all out of time. Thank you so much for coming in. We'll be here next year. Third Thursday is what we're planning on doing again. And until we see you again, just remember, like you are the ones that are going to be most qualified to come up with those institutional policies. And if you learn more information, it is appropriate to update that institutional policy so you don't make that mistake again moving forward. Moving forward, it's going to be 2025. Thank you all. Appreciate you.